I never imagined that my quiet life at Callahan Ridge Farm, the 50-acre inheritance my family nurtured for 3 generations, would be shattered in a single morning. Yet that's exactly what happened, and as I stood there with mud-stained boots and a worn denim shirt, staring at a gleaming white Tesla rolling up the gravel road like some kind of suburban chariot of doom, I realized this wasn't going to be a misunderstanding or a neighborly chat, because the woman stepping out was Marjorie Blackwell, the self-proclaimed ruler of Silver Meadow Estates, and I could tell from the curl of her lips and the way she scanned my land as though it were already hers that conflict had officially arrived at my doorstep, long before I was ready to face it, even if deep down I always knew life had a way of testing the promises we make to those we love, including the vow I made to Lydia, my late wife, to guard this soil for our daughter Grace, who was working with a conservation NGO in Costa Rica, believing the farm she would one day inherit was safe and untouched by the world's greed. Marjorie rattled off 3 violations: architectural noncompliance on the horse barn, grass exceeding regulation height, and an unapproved ranch sign, all stamped with the emblem of Silver Meadow Estates HOA, a ridiculous sight given our property lay across a county road and untouched scrubland from her luxury development. And I laughed at first, thinking she was mistaken. But her smirk only deepened as she unfurled a sloppy pencil map declaring my land absorbed into her jurisdiction through a so-called boundary adjustment, approved, she claimed, by the town council. And when I protested that I had never attended or agreed to anything, she cited tacit consent, waving off my objections like I was a stubborn child refusing bedtime, then dropped the line that lodged itself like a splinter in my brain. Get a lawyer. You'll need one. I wanted to believe this was a clerical error, some overreach that would be corrected with a phone call. But the moment I met Helen Baker, my longtime friend and grocer in Maple Hollow, and heard about Marjorie's past, her disgraced real estate empire in New York, the scandal that brought it crashing down, her subsequent self-coronation as HOA president, my skin crawled, because suddenly this wasn't eccentricity or petty suburban politics. This was someone playing queen with other people's property, and 3 families before me had already been forced to sell by a blizzard of manufactured violations. When I scoured old mail, I found the envelope I'd tossed aside, one of those bland official notices you assume is junk, and inside it outlined the HOA expansion, and in bold, the words, "Absence equals approval." The town meeting was scheduled on a Tuesday morning, ensuring laborers and ranchers like me wouldn't attend, and as realization dawned, a tightness gripped my chest, because this wasn't accidental, this was engineered. I marched to the county office and discovered the land records from 1952 proved our boundaries were immutable without written consent, and the clerk warned me that Marjorie and her attorney, Mitchell Crane, had recently reviewed the files and submitted additional documents. 3 days later, reality slapped me hard in the form of a court summons from the HOA, demanding $25,000 in fines and remediation costs. That night, I sat alone in the farmhouse kitchen, staring at Lydia's photo, knowing I was up against something dark, calculated, and relentless, and as wind rattled the shutters, I whispered to her memory, "I won't let them take this place," even though fear gnawed at me, telling me this battle had only begun, and I was standing at the edge of something much bigger than HOA turf wars, a full-blown land grab, drenched in arrogance and entitlement. Determined not to drown alone, I reached out to my brother Colin, a corporate lawyer in Houston, and when he examined the situation, he said what I already suspected. Legally, the HOA had no authority, but he warned that truth and justice often travel slower than lies backed by funding, and I should prepare for a long siege, documenting everything, never signing anything, and building a fortress of evidence. My investigation unearthed Marjorie's history, the fraudulent investment schemes, the lawsuits, the pattern of coercing owners into selling undervalued land. And as if confirming my worst fears, I soon caught a convoy of luxury SUVs on my property, led by her entitled son Derek Blackwell, surveying my land as if the deed were already in his name, bragging about plans for a rural luxury resort. Before Christmas, and when I confronted him, his smirk mirrored his mother's, followed by a threat that made my fists clench. "We'll be back. with or without your permission. When I sought answers from Mayor Franklin Reeves, a man I'd known for 2 decades, he dodged responsibility, parroting procedure and legality, his eyes betraying guilt, until the very same day I received notice that water service to the farm would be cut, citing infrastructure adjustments for the HOA, revealing how deeply the rot went. Then came the bombshell, a forged agreement bearing my counterfeit signature, and the next morning construction crews rolled up, claiming authority to correct violations. But Sheriff Cole Harrington arrived just in time, siding with the law, not the HOA, forcing them to retreat, though Derek vowed their return. Piece by piece, the truth emerged, darker than I imagined. Through interviews with families previously targeted, recordings and land archives, a singular motive crystallized: water. Decades ago, surveys hinted at a hidden aquifer beneath my farm, and when Helen relayed gossip overheard by Elder Grant's former housekeeper about Marjorie discussing millions in water rights, it clicked. This wasn't about long grass or barn aesthetics. This was a covert effort to seize control of the Verdant Basin, a reservoir with enormous value in drought-ridden Texas. Connections deepened when I discovered links between Marjorie's former business and HydroCore Holdings, a corporate giant specializing in private water acquisition. And then, in a stroke of luck or fate, I saw a hydrological survey map on Mitchell Crane's desk during a tense confrontation. Photographing it before he noticed, the image revealing targeted extraction points beneath my land. The more evidence I gathered, the more desperate the opposition became. My horses were released at night, one injured. HOA propaganda slandered me as an environmental hazard, and after I exposed their water scheme in a local interview, someone sabotaged my brakes, nearly killing me. The mechanic confirmed deliberate tampering, prompting Sheriff Harrington to launch a criminal investigation. And then, from the ashes of betrayal, came an unlikely ally, Ronald Mercer, Marjorie's former partner, who contacted me, offering documents, emails, and proof that Clearbrook Ventures LLC was a shell created to funnel ownership of the basin to HydroCore Holdings. He recounted how she used HOAs as fronts, exploiting legal gray zones to commandeer land with resources, playing benevolent steward while plotting windfalls. Armed with testimony, forged signatures, hydrological evidence, property surveys, and witness accounts, we began to shift public perception. Residents of Silver Meadow Estates grew wary, especially after fees rose to fund the so-called expansion. A town hall I hosted at Helen's store drew crowds, and when Mitchell Crane received a call mid-meeting mentioning Hyde, well, he cut himself off, but the name was clear enough to those listening. With momentum turning, the case was reassigned to Judge Alicia Thornton, renowned for rigor in land rights, a lifeline after months of drowning in corruption. And on the eve of trial, Marjorie arrived with a settlement offer, half the land's value in exchange for surrender. But when I rejected it, her veneer cracked, and she unleashed a veiled threat involving Derek and my livestock, prompting me to call in neighbors for an all-night watch, a symbolic stand around bonfires and barbecue pits, proving I wasn't alone anymore. Court was packed when proceedings began. On one side, Marjorie, Mitchell, and Derek, polished, poised, and confident. On the other, I sat with Colin, trembling beneath the surface but anchored by months of evidence and the presence of farmers and residents who whispered encouragement. The HOA's opening arguments were theatrical, painting me as negligent, reckless, and environmentally harmful, insisting the expansion was legitimate, my silence consent, and my resistance selfish. And when Marjorie testified, she wielded charm and false concern, claiming to protect property values and community welfare, subtly hinting I should relocate if I wanted rustic freedom. But then the tide turned. Colin dismantled their narrative with original surveys from 1952, expert analysis disproving the map, and forensic testimony that the signature was forged. Then came the hydrological evidence, emails from Ronald, and the photo of the underground basin schematic, revealing the true objective, privatization of the water beneath the farm for corporate profit. The courtroom murmured as Judge Thornton permitted the evidence, noting its relevance to motive, and when Ronald testified to the pattern of land seizure and back-channel agreements, Marjorie unraveled, shouting accusations of betrayal, losing the composed persona she had hidden behind for years. Derek faltered under cross-examination, contradicting himself about the site survey and the night the horses were freed, and before judgment could be delivered, a new piece of horror emerged. Video from our night watch showing Derek and accomplices attempting to contaminate the well, aiming to fabricate environmental grounds for forced government intervention, leading to his arrest and eventual confession implicating Marjorie. When court resumed, the verdict landed like thunder. Silver Meadow Estates HOA had no jurisdiction. The signature was fraudulent, the expansion illegal, and all fines nullified. Marjorie, Derek, and Mitchell faced criminal referral for forgery, attempted environmental sabotage, and conspiracy. The HOA board was dissolved and reinstated under new leadership, with strict transparency requirements. A restraining order barred them from approaching the farm. Justice, for once, was swift. With damages awarded, I repaired the barn, established equine therapy programs for disabled children, and opened the property as a community sanctuary, transforming trauma into renewal. Helen and I grew closer, filling a void I thought would remain after Lydia's passing. Colin purchased a nearby cabin, restoring our brotherhood. And when a cooperative approached, proposing ethical, sustainable extraction of the Verdant Basin to serve the region, not private companies, I agreed, ensuring stewardship rather than exploitation. In the end, Callahan Ridge Farm stood not only as my family's legacy, but as a symbol that land, memory, and justice can prevail against greed wrapped in legality, and that ordinary people, when united, can repel even the most polished predators. But now I ask you, and I ask honestly, when the law is manipulated, when wealth and influence twist governance, when a community's lifeblood becomes a commodity, where does rightful ownership end and moral stewardship begin? Was I justified in fighting tooth and nail, risking lives and peace, or is there a line where protection becomes obsession? Justice was served, but in battles over land, power, and survival, does victory ever come without ethical cost?